Hello, this is Stephen out, and yes, we're back with another Harry Potter movie review. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we will be reviewing 2011's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Now, this was the final installment in the official Harry Potter franchise before they, and was way before they did the prequels, the Fantastic Beasts series. This was like the whole story. Everything was wrapping up. I remember around this time, it was the, there was so much hype when this film rolled around. I just, saw on the news, and it was, everywhere. And it made sense because, this is what the films were building up to. David Yates once again returned to direct. And, yeah, that's all I can say. This is essentially a follow-up to Part 1. So the question on everyone's mind is, does this film still hold up? And did it live up to the hype way back in 2011? How do I feel about the film? Well, before we get into the usual, let's get into the cast. We of course have our famous trio once again back, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Now, I love watching how they are in this film compared to the are in the very first installment. It just shows how much the actors have grown here. We, of course, have Fred and George, the Weasley twins. They honestly really don't contribute that much in many ways of comedy like they used to. But it makes sense because, honestly, this is meant to be a much more darker installment. We, of course, have Mcgonagall back. We hadn't seen her she wasn't in the previous film. In fact, a lot of the Hogwarts characters were really left out of it. But it's really great to see her. And honestly, I think this is arguably my favorite, I think the actress Maggie Smith gives the best performance of McGonagall in this film than all other ones combined. Especially since she's, stepping up to the plate. Draco is once again back. I want to explain a little bit more about what I think about Draco in this film as we go through. But of course we have Crabbe and Goyle back. Well, kind of. As the one of them that played the usual Crabbe and Goyle, well, because of a legal reason, one of the actors couldn't come back to reprise, the other half of the infamous twin. So instead of recasting, what they basically did was they just gave the character Blaise, who was already introduced in a Half-Blood Prince, to kind of take up the second position of that. So it's really interesting. We also here have Professor Snape. I really love how his character turns out in this film, and I can't wait to explain more of it as we go on. We have Luna Lovegood, of course, back, absolutely great, and surprisingly the return of Cho Chang. We also here have Neville Longbottom, who I think is the best. My favourite moments of this film come solely from him. Of course, we have Arthur Weasley and Ginny Weasley. I get little problems with Ginny Weasley's chemistry with Harry in this film, but I really love that we get more of a chance to really, but I really like how the less a problem now compared to how we got her in Half-Blood Prince. I really like it. Of course, we can't talk this without, of course, mentioning some of our villains. Of course, Voldemort, still portrayed by, just, wow. He is one of the most infamous villains in history, and Ralph Fiennes does a fantastic job portraying him. Jason Isaac as, of course, Lucius Malfoy. Helena Bonham Carter as Bellatrix Lestrange, and even in the background, even if you can't really see it, Narcissa Malfoy. Again, all great. We also hear lot of the Hogwarts professors back. We have Professor Sprout once again back. Phineas is back. And Slughorn is back, all making really minor cameos and but it's just great to see them back nonetheless. We have Shacklebolt again, one of the most underrated characters for me portrayed in the films. Molly Weasley, great, and surprisingly we have Percy Weasley. He's been absent for the past few films, so that's because his character goes down a different path compared to the other Weasleys. But it's great that he's back here fighting on the good side. I'll explain a little bit more about maybe as we go along, if I feel up to it. We of course have Lupine and Tonks. Great to see them back. Dean Thomas is actually here, and Seamus. We also here get introduced to Aberforth, Albus's, Dumbledore's brother. Very, honestly shocked that they did that. We also here have Mr. Finniage, the caretaker, once again back, portrayed by David Bradley. Honestly, you can't go wrong there. And of course, we have Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour. Honestly, really great to see them back. And because they have Griphook, you know, just really great to see some of these characters coming back. Rounding out really the importance of the cast is of course the return of what the film series always seems to do all the time in certain stories like this, is of course the parents of the hero that, you know, lead them to go down the path they do, and that of course is James Potter and Lily Potter. See them back in a cameo appearance in the same vein we do with Sirius Black, who is of course portrayed by the always fantastic, talented actor Gary Oldman. You can't go wrong there. We also here have Frederick Greyback once again back. We have Scouts, what's his name, back. And of course, another cameo or surprise appearance by Dumbledore, still portrayed, you know, by the always, you know, talented and scene-stealing, especially, sorry, I think I got something in my throat here. Really should have taken some lozenges. Michael Gambon. Again, I would always prefer Richard Harris over Michael Gambon. But again, I think after Half-Blood Prince, the actor truly came into the role of his own. And really, it was kind of like a long journey for me. But I just love that he's back. Anyway, the cast out of the way. Sorry we didn't really get into really the actor's name like I normally do. But because this is more of a final installment, and very few new characters are really introduced in this story, I decided let's not do that, you know, with the character names. Instead, let's just get at, you know, who is coming back for what, and let's just get into this final adventure, that is Deathly Hallows Part 2. We begin this film on a really slow and almost like non-music moment, but with a little recap with the ending to the last film, with Voldemort getting his hands on the Elder Wand, which he got from Dumbledore's grave. And I like how we just get a transition into Hogwarts, how it's not as bright or as cheery, but almost gloom and dark and depressing, with Snape overlooking at the students, which are almost like military type. Like, the happiness that we've seen in the beginning of the series is long gone, and is very dark and very dread, morbid. And then we you know, transition back to where Harry and the gang is, which is revealed to be at Bill and Fleur's, you know, home. So for me, this is like a really bold way to begin a film, and a very, like, there's very little dialogue, it's just quiet, and it's almost like our gang is like lost all hope. And of course, the person to lighten up the mood or make sound is of course Luna Lovegood. And basically, with that, Harry basically goes up and talks to Griphook. The two revealed that they've actually met before, as Griphook was one of the many goblins that was there at the Wizarding Bank at the beginning of the first film. So the fact we get a character return is, you know, and basically they know they have to break into Gringotts, that's the name of the Wizarding Bank, to retrieve the real sword, as the one they've got, as the one there is actually a fake in the vault, and that's why, you know, Bellatrix was going crazy, because they thought they stole the wand from her bank, but really they have the real sword. But later, I want to explain something a little later, you know, to confuse this, you know, to fix this up. But basically, they make a deal to get into the bank and steal something, another Horcrux that they believe Bellatrix is holding. And in exchange to get them in, they agree to give the sword to Griphook. And there's something I need to explain. If you don't know a bit of the lore, basically, the sword was made by goblins, and they have a belief that even though it's given to the witches and wizards, upon their deaths, it gets returned to them. Kind of something still similar to that, but at the same time, there's also a slight review. But at the same time, there's more of a myth, like a bit of a history with the goblins and that sword. I can't really get that much detail because, you know, we've got more of the film to get through. But basically, if you know a bit about that, you can understand why he wants it. And, of course, Harry and Hermione and Ron agree to take up on that deal. Even though they know that they really needed to destroy, you know, the Horcrux, they make that deal and they go along with it. They then go into another room with Ollivander, still betrayed by John Hurt. And here they have a conversation with him about the wands. One, you know, that they've, you know, took from the mansion. One being Bellatrix's, and one being actually the property of Draco Malfoy. And he tells the gang that the wand has now a new allegiance. It's now, you know, it now follows Harry, no one else. And basically, you know, and this conversation is basically, you know, the two really just trying to give each other hope, but also, you know, how he explains how wands work. Again, kind of a reference to the first film, how wands chooses the witches and wizards. It's not the other way around. Showing that, you know, magic has a sort of sentient life and a mind of its own. The two, you know, and basically it ends with, you know, kind of almost encouraging, you know, Harry, you know, that, you know, this is a fool's errand, but, you know, Harry is not going to deter, you know, what they're going to do. They're going to go through with it. As they get ready to go into Gringotts, you know, they need to go in with some disguises. Harry's actually going to use his invisibility cloak, something we really haven't seen in a long time. I think the last time it really might have been used, I like to say it was really in the 5th film, the last time we saw the invisibility cloak actually being used. But Ron and Hermione need other disguises. Ron just puts together whatever he can get, and Hermione comes out looking almost like a dead ringer to Bellatrix Lestrange. And you could see just the pain in her eyes of having to dress as the woman who ultimately tortured her. Again, Emma Watson, fantastic how she manages to pull that off, but also feeling uncomfortable is really great. They then teleport or disapparate to the Gringotts location bank in Diagon Alley, which, honestly, the fact that they go there for the location is pretty great. Eventually, you know, they get under the invisibility cloak, Gringotts and Greyhook and Harry get under the invisibility cloak, while Hermione and Ron, in their disguise, try to make their way into the bank and get to, specifically, you know, the Lestrange's vault. However, they're having some difficulty, but ultimately they use a spell on one of the goblins to help get into, you know, the bank and take the familiar, you know, train rack, you know, that train ride that we definitely remember from the first film. However, they end up, you know, getting dropped as courtesy of going under a fountain that, you know, destroys all magic, you know, magic and enchantment, essentially, you know, exposing them and basically almost alerting that something wrong's going on. But they managed to gain control, and they, you know, put, you know, the goblin that they took with them still back under the spell. We then go in front of the vault, which is revealed to be guarded by an actual literal dragon. And they use this kind of rattling device to sort of calm it and have it not harm them. As they get to the vault, they open it up and, you know, start making their way to what they think is what the possible Horcrux is. They notice the cup, but then as they begin touching all the gold objects, it begins to multiply. Everything in the vault has been enchanted. And it's just, you know, and it's just basically going all crazy. They begin to almost suffocate. Greyhook manages to get his hands on the cup, which is revealed to be the Horcrux, and, you know, it basically asks for the sword in exchange. He gives the cup back to them, takes the sword, and he basically leaves them to run, you know, to pretty much die. With his explanation is, I agreed to get you in. I didn't say anything about getting you out. And he makes a run for it. And, you know, as he's making his way past the dragon, you know, the dragon ultimately ends up firing and burning that goblin, you know, the goblin that got them in here alive. But just as they manage to get out, things are getting worse as suddenly goblins and other security guards make their way into the bank and start firing at them. They are cornered. Hermione comes up with a plan that she says is pretty much mental. Well, and it's just crazy. And basically the plan is jump on the dragon and fly it out of the bank. It is crazy. It is ridiculous, bizarre, but it is their only way out. And so naturally the gang flies out on that dragon out of the bank. And honestly, I really like this scene. It really just shows, just how these three, how they adapt to situations, and really, they take the most craziest option when it's really the only logical way out. The CGI also of the dragon holds up pretty well today. It can be slightly dated, but I still think it holds up pretty well, and the destruction looks very believable. Again, and I really love just the craziness of that situation somehow managing to make it work. Just as they get away from Gringotts and make a good further distance, the trio then jump into the water, where Harry has another vision with eventually Voldemort knowing that the cup's been taken, and he ends up killing basically a room full of people, including Grinhook. And when we go to Grinhook's body, we see that the sword he was holding suddenly disappears. A line that will be... And this will become very important later in the film. And basically, Voldemort basically it's Nagini and pretty much terrifies the Malfoy family to get ready for battle, as because Voldemort managed to get into Harry's mind and knows where they're going. They're heading back to Hogwarts. I like how as soon as they get that out of the water, Harry tells them, Hermione chastises him for, how he can get in his mind. But Harry says it just doesn't work like that. He has no control over it. And Hermione says, well, we need to plan, we need to think. And I love how Harry gets this one logical line and saying, whenever our plans ever actually worked, we plan, we get there, all hell breaks loose. I love that line because it not only does, in my opinion, sum up basically the entire series, but I also like to think that it sums up action films in general. However, Harry does notice that something's wrong with Voldemort. He's feeling a little weaker, he's feeling, a little, weaker, and in his mind, it just makes him even more dangerous. And that's kind of scaring Harry and the rest of the gang. Anyway, our trio makes their way to Hogsmeade, the village near Hogwarts. We haven't seen this place in a while, and also the gang has changed clothes courtesy of Hermione's special bag. They changed into their clothes, and basically end up in a cottage where they run into Aberforth, Dumbledore's brother, and it's revealed that the mirror they've been using is actually connected to him. He was the one who sent Dobby when Harry and Ron were locked in the dungeon. He asked what happened to the house elf. He said he died, and Aberforth says, pity, I actually liked him. However, he also kind of begins to chastise the gang, what they're gonna do. The order's already lost, but Harry has not given up hope. He also gives the gang something to eat and something to drink, obviously to calm their nerves, but also because he knows they've been on the run and probably haven't had that much, in so-called, substance in a long time. But we also get a little bit of a hint to Dumbledore's kind of origin regarding his sister, her fate. Again, I plan to I want to leave it there because that really plays more of a role in the Fantastic Beasts series, and I do plan to, review those film series when I decide it is appropriate to. But basically, Harry's not giving up. But they also have to be quiet whilst they're in Hogsmeade because, because Dementors are everywhere. They're outside of, Hogwarts, which was shown at the beginning of the film, and even in Hogsmeade. However, but with this, they, Aberforth goes to the painting of his sister, and basically, asks to bring help. The trio huddle around the painting, and it opens up. It turns out it's a secret passageway, and who comes out? Neville Longbottom. And honestly, Neville is almost completely changed. He's battered, he's bruised, almost like a war hero. Showing that, how he's been, fighting Snape's regime, when he took over Hogwarts. And it basically restarted Dumbledore's army as a sort of way to fight them. honestly, I love how Neville is a complete, character change from being that little boy who was constantly bullied and ridiculed to now be turning into not only a man, but truly a representation of Gryffindor, being brave, strong, and, very heroic. He takes the gang in and explains how, again, everything's been going on, especially with the Carrow twins. We kind of saw them in Half-Blood Prince, and a little bit in that scene where, Voldemort was coercing with his crew, at the beginning of Part 1 to Deathly Hallows. And basically, by his dialogue, we find out, what they've really been up to, how they've been, practicing the Cruciatus Curse on first years. And basically, they had to all, and basically was trying to make everyone participate. However, some refused, Neville being one of them. As they make their way back, back to, the common room, well, the room of requirements that has, now been transformed into a sort of headquarters, I like how Seamus says, what, you brought more of that food again? And of course, I love how Neville stands aside and it's revealed to be Harry. Everyone cheers, and we get that, the Harry film series theme song. And here we see a lot of fan favorites. We see Luna Lovegood, Cho Chang, Lavender Brown, Crabbit, Dean Thomas, again, Seamus. A lot of fan favorites, all return. Or these minor characters that have all returned, and I like how, it really just shows, how the series has, just how, familiar it's great to see these faces. Even though it's just small roles, it's great to see them nonetheless. They eventually huddle around and basically ask what Harry's doing here. Vaguely, he says they're trying to find something that could hurt who's in the castle. They don't know it's a small object. He says, we know it's not much to go on, and Seamus goes the best line, that's nothing to go on. Even in the darkest of moments, I like how we get that little line. And basically, they also believe it's something to be connected with Ravenclaw, something with Ravenclaw. Luna suggests that maybe the ghost, could know. The Ravenclaw ghost maybe would know. However, they said it's been dead for several years, and no one really sees of her. We then get also a surprise visit from Ginny, who suddenly appears. And she's happy to see Harry, and Ron gets a little bit, angry a little bit. It's just saying, seriously? If I become invisible with I'm only her brother. And Seamus goes, she's got loads of those. There's only one Harry. I love how Seamus is always trying to be optimistic and funny, even in the darkest of moments. But basically, they now get word, someone comes in getting word that, that Snape has called, basically calling everyone into the dormitory, or the Great Hall, I should say. And, and basically they're, scared. I like how, and we see everyone get marched in, with Harry secretly being in it, as we'll find out later, secretly with all the students. Again, under Snape's rule of Hogwarts, the place has almost been turned almost into a military. These kids have basically turned into soldiers. As they get into the Great Hall, we see the Carrow twins, we see, and also all the staff, the teachers, some fan favorites, like Professor McGonagall, we see Flinius, we also see Slughorn back, and of course Sprouts has also made a return too. Anyway, Snape comes forward and basically interrogates the students, saying that he has word that Harry is here, and any student and staff who does not come forward to reveal the location of Harry will be equally guilty and punished. And basically, Snape is kind of, trying to intimidate for someone to give up Harry's location. But Harry steps out and basically gives this, and honestly, Daniel Radcliffe really gives this great moment by basically saying how, despite of all the defensive strategies, you've got a bit of a security problem, Headmaster. And then the door opens, revealing to be, what's left of the order, which includes basically everyone: Shacklebolt, Lupin, Tonks, the Weasleys, which include the return of Percy. Now, Percy's character had a bit of a unique character development, as he was really more as during the 5th installment. He actually sided with the Ministry, going against his parents, believing that Harry and Dumbledore were lying, but of course revealed he was, that they were true. He was too ashamed to come back and say he was sorry. However, when he heard word of this fight breaking out, he naturally, just came back to fight alongside him. So I like how they brought him back. We also here have Fleur Delacour, Bill Weasley, and and even Hermione, Ron, Neville, and and even Dean Thomas in the back. I love how this scene just plays with, basically the orders coming in for one last stand to take Hogwarts back from Snape. Harry then turns his attention to Snape, basically saying how dare he stands where Dumbledore stood. Tell everyone how it all happened that night. How you looked that man in the eye, a man who trusted you, and you killed him. I love how, just the rage and passion that is in, just in Harry just basically talking down to Snape. Finally having a proper confrontation with Snape after in previous films of constantly, just being against him, and two clearly not getting along. I just like how this, this moment, just feels so, so long time coming. And just as Snape gets out his wand, McGonagall steps forth in protection of Harry and gets out her wand. And I like how Snape slowly, backs down a little bit. I don't know whether it's because he's actually scared of McGonagall or there's some genuine respect between the two, but then the two begin to duel it out. And interesting, during the duel fight, it looks like, the Carrow twins get essentially knocked out almost by deflection, both caused by McGonagall, but surprisingly a little bit of Snape it looks like. However, despite that, Snape basically makes a run for it, knocking the two out, and basically him getting run out of Hogwarts. Eventually, McGonagall wins victorious, and we hear the Harry Potter theme song play. Essentially, and I like how it comes at certain moments with, Harry returning to Hogwarts, and them regaining Hogwarts, kicking Snape out and taking down the Carrow twins. It feels like it's so great. But just as the happiness comes, Harry then begins to slightly, pass out with Snape using some kind of magic, obviously, and basically saying, how, to everyone, if you all give up Harry, I will not harm you. And the Slytherins are first to jump on the bandwagon and say, someone quickly grab Harry. However, before anything can happen, Ginny, along with the Order and even some Hogwarts students all step forward to, protect Harry. Just as this moment, we get a little comedy with Finny, coming in saying how students are out of bed in the corridor, only for McGonagall to say they're supposed to be out of bed, you blithering idiot. Feeling a little bit sad, what he said, however, he steps forth and says, on the contrary, your arrival is most opportune. If you could please take all of Slytherin house from the hall. Where to? The dungeons. I love this moment as, honestly, out of all the Hogwarts classes, I guess Slytherin is obviously the most hated because of their reputation. Very few, I think, if any students are actually considered good, as actual good guys. They're mostly as a bunch of bullies. And essentially, it's them, finally put in their place, or essentially getting taken down, and essentially falling at, I think, Slytherin's lowest point. Harry then turns to McGonagall, and, the two have a nice conversation, but basically, he's asking if McGonagall can give him as much time as he needs, and McGonagall says yes. And Potter, it's good to see you. Harry then turns to Neville and says, hold down the fort. We then get this rush scene of everyone preparing for this big battle. It is the final battle and one of the most infamous moments of the series. Hogwarts is about to defend itself against Voldemort and their entire army. And here we get the scene of basically everyone, taking up defensive points. Neville and Seamus and all that setting up a trap at the bridge. McGonagall using her spell to turn all the statues to life to essentially be soldiers to guard the main bridge with the rest of the students, and even with the rest of some students, some staff, and the Order, all at either defensive points but also putting up a massive shield. While that's going on, however, Luna manages to run to Harry and suggests where we could find, the Ravenclaw Diadem. Basically, the Horcrux they're now after, that they now find out, is some tiara owned by the head of Ravenclaw house, back when Hogwarts was first founded. But also, Ron runs into and Hermione run into Harry. Anyway, Harry and Hermione end up catching, Ron and Hermione end up catching up with Harry, and realizing how they destroyed Tom Riddle's diary, you know, and how he did that, which was revealed to be a Horcrux, by using a tooth from a basilisk, realizing they could use that to destroy the cup. Realizing that, Harry gives Ron the special map, the Marauders map, you know, to catch up with them as soon as they finish what they've done. And basically, you know, our team is set to do certain tasks, and we see Voldemort and his essentially whole army arrive, and Voldemort, using the Elder Wand, casts a spell and begins to destroy the shield that is essentially protecting protecting the school. And basically he orders his forces, Death Eaters, giants, and even Snatchers, to go and attack. And the fight begins. Scabs and his forces are, taken down as the special bridge blows up, and Neville, being in charge of that, barely makes it with the line, "Well, that end well." And I love how just this war is just breaking out all over the place. We see, I love the cinematography of it. I love the special effects. It's all holding up very well. And, and we like how everyone is getting a chance to show off their prowess. And, we're really just seeing how, Hogwarts, the place that we've loved throughout the series, is really under attack. It's honestly one of my favorite moments of the film. How this is just getting all out of hand. I like especially how we see, like, how Shacklebolt handles himself. How we see, even Arthur Weasley, like, how he handled himself. Like, it's just full-on chaos. But then we get to, I'd say, a really another fan favorite moment for me, and I'm sure for many. Ron and Hermione are down in the Chamber of Secrets. They get to the skeleton of a basilisk, take one of the deceased's tooth, and use it to destroy the cup, essentially destroying another Horcrux. After barely escaping, water that almost drowned them, we get arguably one of the most fan favorite moments ever of the series. Finally, after essentially 7 films, Ron and Hermione finally kiss. Now, this is a moment long worth the wait, and arguably just one of my most favorite moments. It was just, yes, finally. You've been torturing us with this. You finally gave us that. Anyway, we now come back to Harry, who gets in touch with the ghost of Ravenclaw's daughter. And what essentially happens is, after a talk, which almost leads into a confrontation, gets the whereabouts of where, the diadem is. Harry then eventually runs into Neville and Ginny. Neville basically is running to find Luna, to basically tell how he feels about her before, the day is done, as he feels like we're going to be dead. I love that moment, but come on, give Neville some slack. Ginny gives Harry a kiss, and of course, he's on the run, to go to the Room of Requirements, where the diadem is. We also get an explosion where basically all the Slytherin... Well, there's a deleted scene that would have explained this, where an explosion happened, resulting in freeing the Slytherin students, and this would have been cut in just with what actually happened in the film, with Draco appearing and taking one of I think it's Crab, and in this case Blaze, and basically recruits some, as his minions to go, and follow him. We then see Ron and Hermione trying to find where Harry is. They find his name but disappears. Ron then realizes he's in the Room of Requirements. It doesn't show up on the map. Realizing that's the logical, best reason for it to being. But Draco is secretly behind him, along with Crab and Blaze, and are essentially following him and following them to the Room of Requirements. Harry makes his way in and manages to find the diadem. But there he is confronted by Draco and his crew. At one point, Draco basically asks to give, his wand, for Harry to hand his wand back. However, he says, why? That wand seems to work, but it's revealed it's actually his mother's, not his own. And I also like how Harry uses the moment to say, "Why didn't you rat me out to Bellatrix? You knew it was me." And basically, we see Draco hesitating here. I like for a moment, the old Draco that we love to hate is a little bit back, but as soon as Harry said that, the Draco that, has been essentially seen in this war, he's, the little boy that's really scared of being a part of this. But however, Crabbe comes up to him and says, "Don't be a prat, do it." However, just as that moment, Hermione and Ron come in and, essentially save, Harry. However, and basically, Ron ends up chasing, Draco, Crabbe, and Blaise out with shouting, "That's my girlfriend." Again, another fan favorite moment. I'm glad, we finally got to hear Ron say those lines. Harry manages to quickly get the diadem back, and they notice, hear Ron screaming, along with a very bright light. Ron then quickly runs, grabs Hermione, and says, it was Goyle, not Crabbe. Goyle has set the bloody place on fire. Not realizing what he meant, we then see, basically the fire is some kind of dragon, like some kind of hex spell he's firing, and of course, Harry bolts. I love how as soon as Ron bolted in, the only thing he took was Hermione and left Harry in the dust. I love that moment. It's a little nice chuckle moment, but essentially our trio begin to run for it, with the fire, essentially trying to engulf them, along with the room. They eventually, they eventually manage to get to a corner where they, notice some brooms, and they begin to fly. Again, I love how they brought the broom back, and I think it's the first time in the series we've actually seen Hermione on a broom. Basically, Draco and Blaise managed to get to the top of a stack of equipment. However, Goyle accidentally falls and dies in the fire. It's kind of, and I like how Draco almost looks, sad and shocked about it, but at the same time, he and Blaise are quickly running to get to the top. Harry, however, cannot leave those two to be, to be killed. So he and, go back and save them. I love how Ron says, "Are we dying for them? I'm going to kill you, Harry." They manage to save him and quickly get the hell out of the room of, the room of requirement. And as soon as they get out, they use the basilisk tooth to stab the diadem, essentially destroying another Horcrux, and Ron kicks it into the fire, and they close the room of requirement. Another Horcrux gone. But it's also in this moment, Harry gets another premonition vision, realizing that the next, Horcrux is the snake. That's the next one. We also see how Voldemort, he's become paranoid, his wand begins to break, and, he kills Pylus, one of his top guys out of rage, and he's basically worried that anything going to happen to Nagini. He's his last Horcrux, and agrees to keep him safe. The trio, because of Harry getting to Voldemort's head, realizes where he is at the boathouse, and Voldemort basically asks Lucius to go and get Snape. Again, Lucius looks like a disheveled wreck, and goes along with his master, purely out of fear. As the trio are making their way to, essentially, the boathouse, we get the scene of how they basically run into things that essentially are callbacks to each film. They come across a giant, a reference to the first film from the bathroom. A bunch of acromantulas, those giant spiders, a reference to the third film. A werewolf, reference to the third film. And of course, a bunch of Dementors. Again, a reference mostly to the third film. And then, of course, with Albus suddenly showing up and saving them by firing a Patronus charm, resulting in all the Dementors being, turned away. And clearly a reference to the fifth film with the Order. However, the trio do manage to make their way to the boathouse, but they are secretly hiding and hearing Voldemort have a conversation with Snape. Snape saying how the wand is powerful and has allegiance to you and you alone. However, there should be something noted that we kind of find out. When a witch or wizard deflects someone or, disarms someone, what they've actually done is gained ownership of the wand. Now, or at least kill its owner. Voldemort now believes that because Snape killed Dumbledore, the wand is actually loyal to Snape and no one else. So in his mind, in order to really master of the wand, he kills Snape and has Nagini finish him off in a very brutal way. Harry, Hermione, and Ron make their way in. Harry kind of tries to save Snape, but this is one line that grabs Harry almost out of nowhere when Snape says, "You got your mother's eyes." Now, we've heard that line before, but the fact it's said by Snape shows there's something more to him. They then get their hands on some kind of jar, which Hermione naturally has, to get Snape's tears, and this will reveal everything. And Snape begins to die. And honestly, it's just and I like how it's fitting that really Snape's last moments was looking at Harry, the boy that really fans think that he hated with a passion, but we find out there's another reason behind it, which I'll get to later. Anyway, but Voldemort basically calls off the fight, essentially saying, calls off the fight, calling for a truce, but basically demanding that Harry come into the Forbidden Forest and basically surrender himself. And he promises that, that he won't kill anyone. He offers a truce so that way they can bury their dead with dignity, showing that there is a little bit of honor in Voldemort, though I highly doubt it's really anything more than, just to get under Harry's skin. We then see the gang make their way back to the Great Hall, where we see so many casualties. First off, a bunch of students have died. These include guys like Lavender Brown, being one, which of course we saw really during the fight. And we also see some deaths that really shake the fandom. One is the death of Tonks and Lupine. Truly a sad moment, because for Harry, Lupine is really the last remnant of a person who really knew his parents. So it's a real shame for that to happen. And the scene of how basically those two bodies laying beside each other with their hands out is truly horrible. And it was a reference to the scene just before the battle begins. The two looked at each other and raised their hand out. So this just really, just really hurt. But one hit that really close to home was a death within the Weasley family. And that was the death of one of the twins. Now, if I recall correctly, the death, I think, was Fred Weasley? If memory serves me fully correct. Yeah, Fred. Yeah, Fred was the one who died. And it's really a shame because, Fred and George were like those who really were, the light-hearted ones of the group. And in many ways, it really affected, as all the Weasleys have come around to essentially, mourn the death of, of a family member that everyone, it shook them to the core, like any death naturally would. And again, it's just, honestly, and I think it would have shook up George the most. And the fact that one of arguably the funniest characters in the series died the way he did truly affected the series in more ways. And I like how, as we're seeing all the dead, it's just silent. And Harry coming to the realization that really, that he's not going to allow another death that he feels he personally caused. Which, honestly just really shook. Just really shook the whole, shook the whole series. And this death really, I think, affected me and a lot of the series the most, because this was just something that was, just something that really just affected everyone. And Harry's thinking, all these innocents dead because of me. That is in Harry's head. And I think it's just sad. It's just sad. And I think out of all the deaths, that affected me the most. Affected the most. But Harry realizing what needs to be done, so he agrees to give himself up to Voldemort. But before that, he goes into Dumbledore's office, and with the vial of Snape's tears, goes to that special fountain, basically to see Snape's memories. And here we are revealed one of the biggest plot twists in the series. We get flashbacks to Snape's past, and we find out that Snape befriended a Muggle girl during his youth, and he actually grew to fall in love with. and she was accepted into Hogwarts. Now this girl was revealed to be Lily, Harry's mum. She was then sorted into Gryffindor, where she befriended and eventually married James Potter. Snape would later, of course, would go to join Voldemort's ranks. But when the prophecy came of, a boy that could destroy Voldemort, Snape realized that it was Lily, and she would be essentially marked for death. He then goes to Dumbledore and asks to put him into hiding and keep them safe. But Dumbledore says, "What would you do for me in return?" And he says, "Anything." And there he switches allegiance to Dumbledore. But however, as we know, what happened was Peter Pettigrew, a friend of James and Lily, actually sold them out to Voldemort, which resulted in their deaths. Which explains, way back in the third film, why really, Snape was after Sirius Black. Blaming, as again, everyone thought Black sold the Potters out, but it was actually Peter Pettigrew. And he was after revenge because he blamed him for the death of Lily. But, with their death, Snape naturally believed that the Dark Lord was gone. But however, he said the Dark Lord will return and the boy will be in danger. If you truly loved Lily, you would help. He has her eyes. And Snape agreed, but says that no one can know about what happened. And that explains why after everything, Snape always looked after Harry. Though he would sometimes be cruel towards Harry, he always had his best interests at heart, probably out of the respect and love for Lily. A love that after all these years, he never got over. It's also revealed that we find another shocking truth that night. In the film, we find out on their death, Snape actually went to Godric's Hollow. And, holding a dead Lily in his arms, he saw, I love that powerful moment here. Alan Rickman sells it, but another really surprising twist we get. It turns out why Harry truly kind of survived that night. Not only with the protection made by Lily, but when Snape tried to kill him, the curse may have backfired, but that night, Harry became a Horcrux himself, which explains why he can seek into Voldemort's mind, why he can speak to snakes. Harry is a Horcrux. And this angers Snape, saying, "What, so we're just going to raise the kid to be a pig for slaughter?" When Dumbledore says, "Have you really grown to care for the boy?" He then reveals his Patronus to be a dove, which, as I find out, is actually the Patronus of Lily. And there's a fan theory, there's a, something that is known in Harry Potter lore. If your Patronus is the same person as someone else's, that's mostly due out of how much love you have for that person. So Dumbledore turns to Snape and says, "Lily, after all these years?" And he says, "Always." And this shows Snape what motivates him out of unrequited love, and makes him one of the most sympathetic and arguably greatest character in the series. With Harry shocked by the revelation, he knows what he has to do. He has to go into the forest and confront Voldemort. We also find out that the Patronus charm that in part 1 was actually Snape's. Snape actually led them to the location of that sword. As Harry makes his further way into the forest, he's confronted by Voldemort, all his Death Eaters, and a captured Hagrid. And I like how before Harry goes in, he has one last talk. He opens up the snitch after revealing a special magic word, and it's revealed that the resurrection stone's in there, and has a final talk with his parents, with Lupin, and Sirius Black. They all encourage him how they will be with him till the end. It's a really nice moment, and it shows Harry, how he's evolved really so much. And he then goes into the forest where he confronts Voldemort, and he greets death like an old friend. And Voldemort fires his Elder Wand, seemingly killing Harry. But Nissa Malfoy then goes over to Harry to see if he's dead, but he finds out he's actually alive. But instead of ratting him out, he asks, "Is Draco safe?" And Harry slightly nods. And as a result, he is safe. As a result, She says he is dead, keeping Harry's secret. We also find out where Harry has been sent to, almost this afterlife, which is basically, you know, the Hogwarts station. And here, he is reunited with Dumbledore. They have a nice talk, and it's revealed that the Horcrux inside Harry is really dead. After that, they then move, you know, they have a nice talk, and this is where, and I just love how essentially this is Harry's final goodbye with Dumbledore. But it's also how he's almost get an offer where he could come back and save everyone, or he could finally die and move on. Harry, however, chooses the latter. He agrees to come back. I also love, again, I like how the two get a final goodbye, because Harry never really got the chance to say goodbye to Dumbledore, so this was like a nice final goodbye to the character, and really just shows how the two have really developed a bond and an absolute mutual respect and love for one another. Anyway, but we get back to Voldemort and his army, who make their way into Hogwarts with Harry's dead body. Everyone is shocked. Harry is dead. Voldemort believes himself to be victorious and offers to spare, you know, everyone and us and pretty much people to join their ranks. Draco naturally comes over, though he's very hesitant, but he comes mostly out of fear. The next one is Neville, but he comes mostly to really defy Voldemort and stand up to him. Neville gives this powerful speech saying Voldemort, to Voldemort, Harry may be dead, but, we're not giving up. There's still more fight in us. And like he was coming over with the sorting hat, he then puts his hand in and brings out a sword, Gryffindor's sword, proving that Neville is truly a worthy Gryffindor. I love this moment as, again, it's a huge character transformation from a boy, we've seen at the beginning of the series. From this boy that got picked on to how he's become. And just as he gets that sword out, for one final fight against Voldemort, Harry quickly gets up and shocks everyone. Now, before we go further, there's this one deleted scene I really wish was kept in the film, and many fans agree to this day. Now, when Harry gets up, the next thing he does is fire a wand. However, he came in defenseless with no wand. In the deleted scene, it is Draco quickly running over and throwing his wand to Harry, saying Potter, and Harry catches it. I find it interesting as, even though it's kept out of the film, in the video game adaptation of the film, this scene is really very much kept in. And I really wish that this scene was somehow kept in the film. It wouldn't have killed them, it's just a short scene. But Harry gets up and fires a wand at, the snake, but it kind of ricochets off him and hits a few Death Eaters. Voldemort is shocked, and he sees his forces begin to retreat. Now, I never understood this at first on first viewing, but I do get why now. This is the second time he's done the killing curse on this boy, and he survived. They've realized that, they're beginning to lose fear for Voldemort, and they begin to flee, seeing that they are now on the losing side. As Harry begins to make a run for it, with Voldemort firing, he tells to the guard, everyone to lure them into the castle, and they have to kill the Snape. The fight begins again, with essentially Voldemort chasing Harry all throughout Hogwarts, the Hogwarts school, with Ron and Hermione trying to take down the snake, but they end up getting their tooth destroyed. Just as the fight is continuing in the Great Hall, Bellatrix Lestrange fires a spell at Ginny, but, and she barely deflects it. Molly steps up saying, "Not my daughter, you bitch," and fires at her, and Molly absolutely destroys Bellatrix Lestrange, showing that truly the Weasleys are some of the greatest examples of witches and wizards. Harry's fight with Voldemort gets into the Bell Tower, where I like how the confrontation, where he tries to get in Voldemort's head, saying how Voldemort was right. When Snape said that one was failing you, it's always gonna fail. However, Voldemort's confused. He's already killed Snape, but Harry says, what if it never belonged to him? What if it belongs to someone else? Come on, Tom. I love how he says that line. Come on, Tom. I love how Voldemort's face changes as soon as he hears the word Tom. Very few people in the series actually call Voldemort by his actual given name. And basically, Harry says, let's finish the way we started this, together. They begin flying throughout the grounds in a very CGI that, honestly, it's a bit clunky, but still holds up pretty well. Eventually, they end up, essentially, where, in the middle of, I think it's the courtyard, and they begin, their duel again. And just as, Hermione and Ron, about to get killed by the snake, Neville steps up and uses the Gryffindor sword and basically kills Nagini, destroying Voldemort's last Horcrux, leading a final fight, one fight between Harry and Voldemort. It's my favorite moment, with the Elder Wand failing and Voldemort getting defeated as the wand, as he disarms him and grabs the Elder Wand. But Voldemort doesn't get, though, because he's used the Killing Curse and it's backfired on him again. And this time there is no Horcrux to keep him alive. Now he is defeated and dies. He turns into this, I guess, dust, and he is dead. Voldemort finally defeated, the greatest villain in cinema history, gone in a very fitting way. Now, I also want to explain a little bit, I think I might have skipped over this, why Harry survived, in the forest. Well, it's due to his mother. The protection curse, true, would wear off after he turned 17, but however, because Voldemort put it in his system, the curse lived on. So ultimately, that is ultimately what saved him. Anyway, with Voldemort gone, they go back into the common, the Great Hall, and, we see them, celebrating their victory. Also, I want to point out, when Voldemort's guys were fleeing, the Malfoys were the first to jump on the bandwagon and leave their, master in the dust. As they're walking down the bridge, Harry reveals why the wand didn't work for Voldemort. Well, he revealed it's due to that astronomy tower that night. Voldemort believed that it would be loyal to Snape. However, he was wrong. It's not loyal to Snape, because Draco disarmed Dumbledore. So for a while, the true master of the Elder Wand was actually Draco Malfoy. However, Harry said that was until that night in Malfoy Manor where Harry disarmed Draco, revealing that Harry is the true master of the Elder Wand. It is his. But they questioned what to do with it. But Harry, I guess because now his worn-torn wisdom, he breaks the Elder Wand and tosses it away, seeing no reason to use it. And then the three just stare off into the distance, with their years of Hogwarts now over, wondering what they're going to do now. The next thing is we transition to, I think it's a few years later. I think it was 7, 10, something of that nature, where we're back essentially at King Cross, where we see our favorite trio now sending their kids to school. We also see Draco. He's now married and he's sending his kid to school. Now he turns and gives Harry a nod. This would have, even though it's basically how the two, are no longer enemies, the scene would have been so much more impactful if they really did keep that scene where Draco runs and throws his wand to Harry. I think that would have made that scene pretty good. As these kids are making their way onto the train, Harry takes a moment to talk to his son who's going to Hogwarts for the first time, and he is scared of being sorted into Slytherin. Harry tells him that Albus Severus Potter, you son, are named after 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, the bravest man I've ever known. So Harry literally named his son after Snape, a man who had really been a nuisance in his side for so long. This is, in many ways, truly giving respect to the man who looked after him and calling him the bravest man he's ever known. However, he also does say, if he does go into Slytherin, Slytherin would have gained a wonderful young wizard. And remember, you can choose Gryffindor. The Sorting Hat takes your choice into account. And assures him, that he's in for one hell of an adventure. We then see the kids get on the train and go off. And I also like how it's basically, Ron and Hermione are married. Harry and Ginny are married. And they're just watching all their kids go off to start their adventures. It's a cheesy ending, but it's a great ending. And it's shown just how these characters, especially our beloved trio, has evolved from being kids to these, wholesome adults. It is really a great ending to arguably the greatest film in the series. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, the final installment in the series, and arguably my absolute favourite. Honestly, out of all the films in the series, this is arguably my favourite one. I love it because it's just such a great final ending to the series that is left on a very satisfying way. How our characters have evolved from what they were, in the beginning to where they are now. you know, is like a great long journey I really enjoyed the long watch to. Another thing I also really love about it in general, it feels like a war film, and all the characters that we've seen in the past films, how they've evolved and how we remember what they were at the beginning to where they are now, is just, you know, one of my absolute favorite highlights of it. Our trio, how they come into their own, and so much of my fan favorite moments are, and again, the payoffs, finally, Ron and Hermione becoming a couple, Voldemort's defeat, and true, we do get some sad moments along the way, but I also like how it further developed our characters, and also we get some very great twists, and arguably some very great character development. This is why it's my favorite, where, you know, because everything ends here. It's also, we can all agree, probably the most mature of the Harry films. And for many, this is easily in top 3, and to some people their favorite. For me, it is no exception. Arguably, this is the best Harry Potter film of the bunch, and I consider it my personal favorite. And there we have it. That was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. That's all I can say about it. Again, it is my favorite film of the series, and it was such a huge success at the box office too, earning over $1 billion, arguably becoming the highest earning film of that, you know, ever, and the highest grossing film in the series. And here we are, we've come to the end of the Harry Potter series. Well, what do I plan to do now? Well, I'm going to take a break from doing film, like long film by film review, like series wise, but however, I do plan to do Fantastic Beasts, but that's going to be a further bit down the line. I have another film series in mind, but again, I'm going to take a break to focus on doing top 10 videos, the TV show reviews, movie reviews, and completing the Green Hornet episode review. You know, 66, plan to, you know, complete that. But, you know, this was a really great fun down memory lane to go and watch these films. If you haven't seen any of them, give them a watch. I highly recommend them. And also put in the comments below, because I said this is my personal favorite. Is this your personal favorite? What is your favorite Harry Potter film? Please write it down in the comments. And until next time, this has been the Steven Hour. And ladies and gentlemen, so long for now.